Awesome. There we are. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am grateful to be the chair of this subcommittee. I think we have a lot of incredible work before us. And I'm, again, excited to be part of this group. I think we cannot underestimate the history that we are currently making and are prepared to make, I think. So I would like to call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. So before we get started, I want to express my sincere condolences and our sincere condolences as a subcommittee to Delegate Danielle Walker, who just lost her son, Dimitri, to leukemia. I'm sure some folks have seen this news on social media and in the news. Delegate Walker is asking for people to make an appointment to give blood so that it may help someone else. If it is safe for you to do so, please contact your local Red Cross online or at 1-800-RED-CROSS or 1-800-733-2767 and make an appointment to give blood. Now I'd like to ask Mary Thorpe, co-chair of the Affirmative Action Committee, to provide us with some historical background information to give some context for the work that we're about to do.
Rosemary, thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you be heading up this committee, and it's pretty exciting to have everybody join us tonight as we begin this process of actually writing the affirmative action plan. So for those of us that are on this planning committee, as well as the whole affirmative action committee, recognize the importance and the value of all this work, and welcome everybody as you join us tonight. So in 1974, the National Democratic Party mandated that all state parties adopt an affirmative action program to provide for representation of certain diversity groups proportion to their participation in the Democratic electorate. So the program was mandated to have specific goals and timetables to achieve that purpose. On March 15th, 2021, just a few months ago, here in West Virginia, the West Virginia Democratic Party Executive Committee adopted these new bylaws that mandated an affirmative action committee to draft an affirmative action plan. The purpose was to encourage full participation by all Democrats, with particular concern for historically underrepresented groups, such as Asian American Pacific Islanders, Black Americans, Latin Americans, LGBTQ+, Native Americans, persons with disabilities, seniors, that is 60+, women, and youth. Under 36 is the youth category in all party affairs. So the Democratic Party rules provide for more than just geographical representation. It also provides for representation by gender, in that all official Democratic organizations must be equally divided between men and women. And there is an inclusive language regarding those that identify with non-binary. However, the Democratic Party also provides for representation for certain historically underrepresented groups. For example, from our current data in West Virginia, Black Americans make up 6% of the people who vote for Democrats. Therefore, the Article 8, Section 3 of the National Charter and Article 8, Section B of the newly adopted West Virginia Democratic Party bylaws mandate that this state party have a program that provides that 6% of the WVDP Executive Committee are Black Americans. Additionally, our most recent data of the other historically underrepresented groups are as follows. You might want to take notes on this. The Asian American Pacific Islander are 1%. Black Americans, as I said, 6%. Latin Americans, 2%. LGBTQ+, 8%. Native Americans, 1%. persons with disabilities, 24%, and youth under 36, 26%. Women and seniors, as you know, already have full representation. Rosemary, back to you.
And we love our women and seniors. And while those percentages seem small, the impact of our diversity groups cannot be underestimated. And I think even the impact of, especially the impact of not having them involved in a process like this, I think is truly, and unfortunately felt. I want to walk us through the purpose of this committee. This is a very important group of folks. And the task of the committee ultimately is to provide a plan and program for outreach regarding affirmative action, reaching out to Democrats across the state of West Virginia. Before this, we have not had a comprehensive, holistic affirmative action outreach plan. And so this committee in particular will be charged with that task, with our emphasis, of course, being on the diversity groups previously listed. And outreach, in my eyes, and in the definition, literally means to reach out to the community, to be a kind of boots on the ground group that reaches out to community members and meets them where they are. We use that phrase often, to meet people where they are. But I think in this context, we truly have to make that our principle and guiding value. So that means, of course, being in person, providing in-person advocacy, outreach, social media. We are able, thank goodness. One of the positive things coming out of the pandemic is that we can now be in 10 counties in just a couple hours over Zoom, which was possible beforehand, but not many of us were familiar with that opportunity, and now we can do that. All of these things coming together will hopefully be part of our outreach plan to ensure that the incredible diversity of the state of West Virginia, the folks that we do have here in the state, are able to hear our message, but more importantly, are able to have a seat at the table and help guide the direction of ultimately the Democratic Party. So developing a plan to add diversity and diverse voices to the West Virginia Democratic Party is what we are tasked with doing, and is a privilege and an honor that we get to do that. So I think we get to begin the process now. I would like to take roll call. First, Mary Thorpe.
I'm here.
Hollis Lewis.
Here.
Rusty Williams.
Here.
Jared Powell.
Here.
Ariana Islam.
Here.
Marilyn Monahan.
Here.
Welcome.
Here.
In our first meeting on June 2nd, the members of the Affirmative Action Committee unanimously agreed that while we would take steps to begin gathering data and information regarding an affirmative action plan, we understood that there are two caucuses that have yet to meet, yet to be fully developed, and then they would not be part of drafting this plan. Unfortunately, they have yet to meet. I believe their next meeting is on, their first meeting will be on July 6th, if I'm not mistaken. And so the hope for this meeting tonight is not necessarily to put a plan together. I think it would be irresponsible for us to start building this integral and critical plan without those two really important caucuses being developed and having a seat at the table. We kind of want to practice what we preach here and ensure that we are building something that is comprehensive and holistic. So tonight we will—
Rosemary, I just want to add, because I know other people are thinking the same thing I am. There are actually 3 committees. We missed the Latin one. So Latin, Native American, and AAPI.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that's even more reason why we need to, I think, take a pause on building out this affirmative action plan tonight. And even still, I think even if those committees were at the table right now, I think it is really important to create a space where we can have a conversation about what we would like to see and some of the data that we would like to collect. So the primary decision will be among voting members of this committee. However, again, practicing what we preach, input from the grassroots folks on this call and just other folks who are interested in this process are crucial to the conversation. So at the end of this call, if I am so permitted and if folks are interested, there will be 10 minutes or so allotted for participants that are not official members of the planning committee to make comments and suggestions and to share their insight. Because I think while you may not be a voting member on this committee, it is really important that we hear from all folks who wish to be heard. So this time will be allotted per individual and will be based on the number of folks wanting to speak, and we'll get to that as we get to the end of the meeting. And at the appropriate time, we will ask you to either raise your hand if you're on the Zoom call with us, or if you are on the phone, and I feel like we have a couple folks who are using phones tonight, I believe you can use *9 to raise your hand. Or of course, you can use the chat feature, which is a wonderful feature, just so that we're not all kind of chomping at the bit and talking over each other, which I think is really helpful. So Mary, myself, and Hollis have proposed a form to capture the data that we're talking about. The data that is so critical and necessary for outreach to diversity groups. And I believe, I don't have it with me, but I believe we have that to share.
Selena's going to screen share it when we're ready, Rosemary.
Okay, okay, wonderful.
So in order for us to do the effective outreach to the diversity groups, we need to know the leaders, the organizations, the media, the social media, et cetera, specific to each of the diversity groups across the state. And once we have this data, we can begin to build the specific outreach methods into our affirmative action outreach plan. We don't pretend to know any of that information and understand that outreach, those outreach methods. That information needs to come from each of the diversity groups themselves. So we're asking the planning committee for feedback on this survey and for approval to share it throughout the caucuses. I don't think that it's been mentioned that there's a caucus, an all-caucus meeting tomorrow night. I hope somebody can put the link in the chat so anybody that wants to register for that can join us tomorrow. So it's all the caucuses. We're going to have an update on what's been going on. That will be followed by a breakout session. It will be the first information caucuses for those 3 caucuses that we mentioned earlier. And then the other 6 caucuses will meet at the same time. And each caucus member, each caucus co-chair will bring the information to their caucus, including, if it's passed this evening, this collection document to get started on the process. So tonight we want to show the document and then ask the planning committee for your feedback and approval to share it within the caucuses, beginning with the caucus meeting tomorrow night. So if it's approved by everybody on this planning committee, all the data collected will be shared with this committee as well as the affirmative action committee. So if it's okay with you, let's put that survey up on the screen and go through it. And so keep in mind that each diversity co-chair can add questions to their section. You want to go through it, Rosemary?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I can see it. So this is a data collection form, a Google form, which I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with. And essentially it says the Affirmative Action Committee shall encourage full participation by all Democrats with particular concern for minority groups, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Black Americans, Latin Americans, LGBTQ+, Native Americans, persons with disabilities, seniors, women, and youth under 36. And as we build this inclusive plan, we need to identify resources for the various diversity groups. Maybe we got a typo there. So the first note, identity to identify, resources for the various diversity groups. And so this is, again, essentially a Google form that folks can fill out so that we can transfer information to a Google sheet so that we can have a kind of treasure chest of data. So most of that's just very generic demographic information. This here, if you scroll up just a little bit out, we can read part of this at least. It kind of outlines the 1974 mandate from the National Democratic Party and the various percentages. And then the question is, at this time, most of the diversity groups have not reached their goal of having proportional representation. Assuming the goal is full proportional representation of all diversity groups, what should be the timeline to achieve that goal? With the notice that the next organizational meeting to elect new leadership of the West Virginia Democratic Party is June of 22. And so that's an important conversation to have. How long do we think it should take for West Virginia to achieve this proportional representation? So folks will answer that individually, of course. Diversity outreach ideas. So we will use this section to identify various resources and places that we can participate in outreach, which will be super important. So you can choose your specific demographic information. And then, so for example, if we had chosen AAPI as our, caucus or the demographic group we're a part of, it will populate questions specific to that demographic group. So for example, list all AAPI leaders, formal or informal, meaning individuals or organizations perhaps, and provide their name, email, phone, county, and other information that you may know. Betty has a comment. Betty, I'm going to go through them real quick, and then we'll get to questions if that's okay. Awesome. Again, it asks for organizations, formal or informal in West Virginia. And we have, I think, a great wealth of organizations that are both formal organizations that and that's, I'm not sure what exactly our definition of formal is, but in so many ways, I think you can imagine what that means. And then more informal organizations.
Rosemary, as we go along, might you suggest from your diversity some different answers for these so people kind of have an idea of where to look? Does that make sense to you? Like please list all the organizations, formal or informal, in West Virginia that would be LGBTQ places that you might recommend.
Great idea. Yeah.
Oh, she's going to go right to the LGBTQ. Look at that. Thanks, Selena.
Perfect. Yeah. Now I'm going to be put on the spot, folks. I better know these answers.
Well, just give a couple of examples, and you don't have to do it for everyone, but
no. I'm good. No. So
okay.
Yeah, for example, different leaders. So when I think of LGBTQ leaders in the state, I think of folks like Andrew Schneider at Fairness West Virginia, Executive Director, of course. I think of Danielle Stewart, and her wife, Christina, that run Beckley Pride. Those are some LGBTQ leaders. Ash Orr, that is part of the Human Rights Commission in Huntington, I believe. So yeah, those are some incredible leaders that I think I would put down there. And then if I do have their contact information, I'd put it in. Organizations that have LGBTQ advocacy. I mean, almost all of the organizations that I align myself with have some component of that. So again, I think of Fairness, I think of the ACLU, I think of Planned Parenthood, I think of, maybe West Virginia Free, I think of organizations that have some component of LGBTQ plus advocacy in West Virginia. Community businesses or places, formal or informal, that are frequented by LGBTQ plus folks. Now, everybody will have different answers to this, of course, because we all live in different areas. So for example, I would say here in Wheeling, we have a couple community businesses like Later Alligator, which is a cool, like hipster restaurant that I love so much. If Mitch is listening, I love it. And that's a place where LGBTQ folks feel welcome and included because, the leadership there, that is a value of theirs. And for example, an organization or a company like Oric, which is an information processing company in Wheeling, they have their own, I believe they have their own LGBTQ specific subcommittee in that organization. So I would put that down. Please list media or journalists that in West Virginia that target LGBTQ plus folks. And we might want to workshop the question, and does it mean that we are that these are resources that target LGBTQ people in attacks, or by attacking their character, or targeting them by providing resources and information? This is in a good way, which is good. And maybe we should also be thinking of the places that attack them the other way.
It might be a good idea to put all of that in. That's what happens when this comes into dialogue, is things occur that you don't think of on your own. It's perfect. Very good, Rosemary.
Yeah, and as an LGBTQ person, I took it as, you're going to target me in not a positive way. So no, but that's a great point. Like, we need to include media and journalists that are, advocates and supportive. The first, resource or media outlet that comes to mind is Mountain State Spotlight, that I think has really done a lot of great work around LGBTQ plus stories. Social media sites or hashtags in West Virginia that target LGBTQ folks, I think a lot of the times those can be the complement of the organizations and companies that we talk about that typically have their social media accounts. I would also include here all of the different pride organizations that I'm affiliated with or that I know about that might not consider themselves formal organizations, typically because they maybe organize just once a year for Pride. But I would put them here for social media and hashtags for sure. And then lastly, anything that wasn't picked up on that you would consider an LGBTQ plus resource in West Virginia could be entered in this portion. And then long answer ideas about just, hey, you're smarter than we are, I'm sure. What are your ideas about pulling folks in and creating or developing creative outreach solutions, which I think is really, really at least what I want to see from our Democratic Party, creative outreach solutions, not the typical put it in the paper, share it on Facebook, but how can we get creative and create some high impact outreach? Okay, and then lastly, if you are part, if you identify with intersectionality and you have a identity that is part of another demographic group, then you can choose to answer those questions as well. Am I going too fast? Is this okay? I just want to be mindful of our time.
I think you're doing fine, Rosemary. One of the things that I heard was, you mentioned Planned Parenthood for one of the organizations, and what I can hear is that can get mentioned, that organization will get mentioned in other groups as other caucuses as well. So it's really going to be an interesting piece of work as we bring this together and start laying it out to create this plan. Thank you for going through it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I completely agree. So maybe the most important part, if somebody's filling out this form and they are like, man, I really want to be involved in a stronger way, in a more serious way, we would love for folks to identify themselves with a potential leadership role. And so we have listed a couple here. There may be more that we can add, but for example, the Democratic Executive Committee at a county level, Congressional District Democratic Committee members, delegate to the 2024 County Democratic Convention, the National Convention, And if you aren't interested in, joining any kind of leadership position, we'll get you next time, because I'm sure you'll catch the bug and you want to be part of it.
Well, and I think we should put on here any other ideas that haven't been mentioned above.
Great point, because leadership positions in the party are primarily formal positions, but I'm sure there are some informal leadership positions that we could, include that would be just as, I think, important and instrumental. Wonderful. Okay, so that was a lot, I know, and I apologize for rushing through it so quickly, but I want to open a space for discussion and about the document about data collection. I know there are some questions in the chat, so I want to make sure that folks have a chance who are members of the committee to talk about these questions, maybe make some recommendations or suggestions about what we could add, and then just clarify some things.
Hey, Rosemary, how you doing? It's Hollis.
Hey, Hollis.
All right, so just to be clear, just so it's clear, the document that you just went over, that's going to be part of a data collection in order to get information that would eventually go into our affirmative action plan, correct?
Correct. It will help us help us illustrate exactly what our plan should look like, and ultimately our outreach that will help us understand the landscape that we are working with in West Virginia. Because I'm not sure, I'm not the history buff that Mary is, but I don't think we've really ever done this kind of data collection at this broad a scale or scope. So I can't imagine developing outreach without it. So yeah, exactly correct. This will be part of both our affirmative action plan, helping us better understand exactly how that should be laid out, but also, just as important, what our outreach should look like. Any recommendations or edits from committee members or thoughts or concerns? Feel free to bring those up now. Wonderful. With just the one amendment to change identity to identify. Small, but important.
One more question.
Yeah.
In addition to this document being used sort of internally, is this something that we can maybe, I think one of the questions was like, what other organizations are you affiliated with, or they represent your various caucus? So is this maybe a document that could be used for those organizations that kind of like, for example, the NAACP? Could it be something I could submit to them and have them sort of fill out, or is this something just strictly for you?
That's a great question. So tonight we will hopefully vote on it and pass it with amendments. And I don't see why not. Correct me if I'm wrong, Selena or Mary. But I think this could absolutely be something that we send, of course, caucus-wide, ultimately, if we are able to pass it tonight. Yeah, I don't see why data collection couldn't be further than that.
Here's my input about it, Rosemary, that we vote on it tonight as the planning committee, and then have the co-chairs take it to their caucuses tomorrow. And the different caucuses may relate to it in different ways, and we can discuss some of those thoughts about it through the committee as we keep working with it.
Great idea. And the hope is that members of those caucuses are also members of those other organizations like the NAACP, and hopefully have that insight to be able to answer it in that kind of perspective.
And I agree that one of the bits of feedback that we've had from so far, because this the way it stands right now is it's just gone out to the co-chairs for feedback. and with the exception of Kim Felix, who is a diversity member of the executive committee, and that was sent to her as well. And so the feedback we have is to include a place for volunteers, which, you know, it's one thing to identify leaders, but often your volunteers are really like, I mean, super on the ground, like nitty gritty on the ground, and they have their own outreach ideas. And so I think that makes sense to collect that information as well. And then the caucus co-chairs may have like an additional question that is very specific to their diversity that they think. And so I think that approving this, understanding that it may kind of grow and develop over, you know, with feedback, but generally to be an evolving piece, a tool that you guys use to collect data. And I think it is a great idea to share it with the caucuses tomorrow night, and then just get it out to as many people as possible. The more information that we have, the more informed the first draft of the affirmative action outreach plan will be.
Mm-hmm.
Selena, could I ask you a question about, you know, sometimes, well, not sometimes, some of the things that there are to address is like, what are the barriers that people have to participating? So for instance, if I'm a young mom and I've got 3 kids, will we provide childcare? Or what if people don't have money to pay for gas for getting to a meeting? Or, you know, are those included anywhere on this survey, or will those be separate? Any thoughts about that?
I think Rosemary has, my understanding, Rosemary has a proposal that she's going to make that kind of addresses some of the barriers. We already know that this is a very lengthy form, and it's going to take some commitment from people and some begging. We need this information. There's no other, I don't, you know, certainly we want to have one-on-one conversations with people. We want to have some forums in the caucuses where people talk about this. But I mean, if we want, you know, addresses and phone numbers and like that place that Rosemary talked about, what was the place that you said was very LGBTQ friendly that people went to?
Later Alligator, just a restaurant. Yeah,
nobody would know that. Like nobody, like if Rosemary was not a part of this committee, nobody, you know, if we're trying to put together a plan, nobody would know that that is a place that you can do outreach. And so, you know, for as many people as we can get to participate in this form, to give us specific information, and it will continue to grow, but I think that's really important. So I don't know that the barrier aspect, while we need that information, I don't know that it should be on this form, but I think Rosemary has a really good idea that after you guys move, you know, get past this particular thing, I think she wants to introduce something that I think you guys will be interested in.
Absolutely. Very incredibly important. We need to ensure that we are, you know, getting there, but having this kind of nugget of information is, I think, the first step.
How about if we call on Marilyn?
Marilyn, I'm sorry, I don't have the big screen up.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on it. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. My question is, you know, the West Virginia Division of Rehabilitative Services has a huge list of people who have, you know, different abilities or differently abled or disabled, depending on how you say it. But I don't know if that's something that we would have access to under HIPAA or Title VII. I'm not sure, but somehow reaching out to that community would be great. My son is in that community and no one ever reaches out to him. He's been on that list forever, and they say they're Division of Rehabilitative Services, but it's just a list that has people's names on it. They're not really, I don't know. I just thought I'd offer that up as an idea of a place we could reach out. So
thanks, Marilyn. I appreciate that.
Sure. Sure.
So does somebody have a motion for accepting this data collection document?
I would like to present the motion to accept the data collection document.
I second it.
All right, all in favor? We can raise our hands.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes. Thanks, folks. And like we said before, this is an evolving document, but I think an incredibly important first step in developing our outreach plan. We should have the best outreach plan anywhere in the country. I have no doubt we will get there, but these are really important, critical first steps. So in addition to this survey, like we mentioned before, it is really important that we are working to address the barriers to participation that people may have. There are barriers that involve lack of internet access. We know across the state of West Virginia, we have an issue with universal broadband that needs to be addressed. We know that childcare has been a consistent concern regarding lack of participation. Zoom is helpful, but again, if you have that, if you're doubling down without childcare and spotty internet, good luck getting to a meeting anywhere at any time. And so we want to, I think, open a discussion to talk about some of the barriers that we need to address. There are some obvious ones, some explicit ones, but I think that the folks on this call are probably aware of some more implicit barriers to participation. And ultimately, in my eyes, I think, we can, again, have this incredible outreach strategy, but unless we are prioritizing addressing barriers to participation, which are oftentimes the reason why folks do not get involved, I think our ability to do our work well will be unsuccessful. So I would love to ask members of the caucus or members of the subcommittee to share any information or insight they have regarding maybe personal lived experience regarding lack of participation or barriers to participation, or anecdotal stories that you are aware of that we should include moving forward in our outreach plan.
Just to clarify, Rosemary, when you say barriers to participation, are you talking about like meetings like this, or you mean like getting out to vote? I just want to make sure we're
thank you.
On the same page.
Yeah, no, I think honestly both, but primarily meetings like this. Like what are the barriers to actually being in? I have my own examples of what those barriers look like, and I'm sure folks on the call do as well.
I would just start, and I just say just access to information. You can't, unless there's not like just one place I can go to that's either accessible, whether it be online or like with social media. So like prior to me getting involved, I wouldn't have known even where to start, or none of the players involved. Or who can I go to in my community, or somebody I can just reach out online. So I guess that would be just to start us out.
Yeah, great point.
Well, for me, a few of those things were mentioned when we, when I said about people not having a car, people not being able to pay for gas that stops them, kids, parents having kids that doesn't let them get away, childcare. Those are the things I can think of right at the top. And then Marilyn, you've got your hand up.
I was just encountering several people who would have been great for the caucus, who for reasons of distrust, mistrust of the government, are afraid to come forward. Even though these individuals have naturalization, paperwork, and so forth, I wonder how we can assure or assuage those fears, however you say that word. I just want to make sure that people don't let their fears hold them back. And the same goes true with how we identify in terms of our disabilities. Some of these issues can be painful to talk about. So how can we make it feel like a safe space that's non-governmental?
Thanks, Marilyn. And Rusty?
I was just going to address one of the comments that Kelly Elkins made about meetings lacking interpreters or captioning, but Kim had already addressed that a few lines down. So yeah, I lowered my hand. It's all good.
That's a great point, Rusty. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, too.
So anyone else have anyone else from the committee? Anything from you, Jared?
Nothing. No, I just would concur with like what the rest of the group has said.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Ariana? Oh, I'm sorry, Rosemary, go ahead.
No, Ariana, you're good.
Oh, no, I don't have anything to add either. Just echo their statements as well.
Thank you. Okay, Rosemary.
Thank you so much. I would add self-confidence is a big one. I know a lot of folks who want to be involved, but they don't feel confident enough, experience imposter syndrome, things like that. So maybe a potential component to our outreach is that kind of confidence building, and as well as trust building, which Marilyn mentioned, and I think is so important. So I'm grateful that we were able to cover some ideas around barriers to participation. And I'd love for this conversation to be broadened to our caucuses. So if I can be permitted, I'd love to suggest that over the next several weeks, if we are in agreement about barriers to participation, I'd love to throw that out to the caucuses that will ultimately meet hopefully very soon to have that discussion and hopefully collect that information so that we can understand, again, the explicit barriers to participation, but some of the things that we may not understand at all. So I would love to, after this meeting, meet with some of the co-chairs of the caucuses and schedule some dates for those conversations.
Okay, thank you. Chris has her hand up. Chris?
Hey, Chris.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, especially with the Latinx caucus, we can't protect people from ICE. And I think we do have to be a little careful. Some people have valid reasons for not participating, and they're protecting their families. Even if they got papers, somebody in their family doesn't, their kid doesn't. And so we have to be we should be careful. There's not a whole lot we could do to protect people.
All right, thanks, Chris. Oh, I'm sorry. Just let me think for a minute. Go ahead, Rosemary.
You're good. You're good. I can give you a minute.
Oh, good. I just remembered what it was. There's a whole big thing in the chat about the meeting tomorrow night for the caucuses. And I would like for us, I hope it's all right to do it right here and at this point in the meeting.
Yeah.
But the way I understood, and I think that what's going on in the chat is different than the way I thought it was going, is that tomorrow is an all-caucus meeting. Selena, maybe you could have some input on this. That it's an all-caucus meeting where we're going to begin with an update for everyone. And then the three caucuses that have not yet met that we mentioned earlier will meet for their first time. And at the same time, we'll have breakout sessions for the other 6 caucuses. So there will be a breakout session for 9 caucuses tomorrow night. And then 2 weeks from tomorrow night, which is July 6th, is the 14-day notice that needs to happen. So before an election for the co-chairs of those 3 caucuses. So I know that that it's been said in the chat that there are only the 3 caucuses tomorrow. So do I have it correct? Can we get it? Can we just have a little conversation about it to see who the meeting's open for tomorrow?
Okay, so the meeting tomorrow is open. All meetings are open to the public, period. The meeting tomorrow night is sort of an all-call meeting to do updates and for each of the caucuses to meet individually, but specifically it was the first meeting for the 3, AAPI, Native American, and Latin Americans. And there will be time, each of the co-chairs can cover whatever information that they want to in those caucuses. But I assume we also kind of planned that to be the day after this meeting, assuming that there would be information from this to then share with them. So this forum and the discussion about the barriers, that would be things that I'm sure that Rosemary will pass on to the co-chairs and say, please share this with your caucuses, have this discussion or whatever. The July 6th meeting is actually a 30-day notice that came, that was set in place for those three because they have yet to elect their co-chairs. So tomorrow will be sort of their first opportunity to have some understanding of what's going on. And then July 6th will have been the 30-day notice where they can elect their co-chairs and then join the rest of the affirmative action committee, join the subcommittees and things like that to then continue to work on the plan. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. I think that's clear for everybody. All right, now back to you, Rosemary.
Thank you so much. I'm just getting a look at the chat. I'm a terrible chat checker. So I so apologize that that all these questions went unanswered by me, but I see you now. And I thank you, Mary, for checking when hands are up. So wonderful. I think that provided a lot of clarity. I'm very excited for tomorrow's meeting. We have about 14 more minutes left, give or take. And I want to make good on the promise we made in the very beginning and open up a discussion for folks who are not members of the subcommittee. So we are dedicating 10 minutes or so for comments, and I would love folks to either raise their hand, let us know in the chat if you are interested in speaking, and if you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And if you could limit your comments to under 60 seconds, just so that we can ensure that we are able to hear from as many folks who are interested.
Rosemary, I have one more thing about the meeting tomorrow because there are people who are in 2 caucuses.
Oh,
so we're all grown-ups here. Go to whichever caucus you want to. Set it up with somebody in your caucus to get to get updated if you're going to miss one of the caucuses or figure out how to go to both of them. So that's my answer to that. All right.
Great point, Mary. Life happens. Yeah.
Well, I think we also are going to encourage the caucuses to allow time for, if people need to switch so that they can get caught up on the other information as well. We knew when we set that there might be some difficulty, and we want to try to meet people's needs.
Thanks, Selena.
And I think it's *6. Kim private messaged me because I don't know how Zoom works. So thank you, Kim. I love you. *6 to unmute if you are on the phone. So thank you.
Is there somebody who could watch time? If not, I can. It needs to be somebody that's on the committee. Hollis, Jared, Rusty.
I'll watch the time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hollis. Just give a cue and then people wrap up whatever your sentence is. Thank you.
I'll give you like a 10-second, or I'll give you 15-second notice.
On a minute? All right, Hollis. Thank you.
Yeah. Hollis. Any hands, any folks who are interested in sharing their comments, concerns, or suggestions?
Betty Rivard.
Hi, Betty, you're up. Oh, you're muted, hon. You got it. Are we?
Selena, can you unmute Betty?
There she is. Got it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I gave Mary a list of things to consider that's too long to go over in 60 seconds. And I'm hoping those can get shared with the committee. But I think the main point that I'd like to raise as a suggestion to you all is to be sure and coordinate with the bylaws committee and arrive at some kind of mission, vision, and goals that are consistent between the plan and the bylaws, because I think we'll really be in trouble if we don't do that. And in terms of process, that might require some kind of facilitated retreat for a couple of hours on Zoom, or whatever it takes to do that in person or on Zoom. But I think it's well worth the time, because having done statewide planning for years, I've seen a lot of success come out of that, saves a lot of steps down the line.
Thanks, Betty.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosemary.
Rosemary, I don't see any other hands, but I see a question about what's the timeline for the outreach plan.
Great question. As far as I know, we get to develop that timeline ourselves. Of course, as soon as possible, we want to make sure that we are able to collect data and build an outreach plan from the nuggets of information we have. But as far as I know, from the formal Democratic Party, we do not have a required timeline. So that's I think a question that the caucus, rather the subcommittee, can answer with the caucuses.
Good. The other input that I would have is that question about how soon do we want this put in place will inform that. That's that first question on the survey or on the Google form that's there. And it'll be really important for each of the people on the caucuses to give their input about that. And then I see another question here that says, what is the intersection with the Democratic Party? Seems that this has a lot of potential to move party forward in a valuable, necessary way. Does anyone have an answer? I don't have an answer for that at this moment. Selena?
Yeah, I was unmuting. So I don't think that this is intersection with the Democratic Party. I think this is the Democratic Party. I mean, this group, the Affirmative Action Committee, is mandated by the bylaws of the Democratic Party to develop this this plan, to have an Affirmative Action Committee to develop this plan. The Affirmative Action Committee decided on June 2nd to have a subcommittee to focus on the planning. They wanted very much to do as much as they could before the other groups come on, but not go into the actual drafting of a plan without those other three groups. The theme that I have heard over and over and over again with the members is that even though these are a bunch of different diversity groups, all boats rise together, that these are groups that have been underrepresented for a long time, and they want to, they recognize their pain, they recognize the pain of other groups, and they want to all work together. So this is what the State Executive Committee has asked them to do, and so it is, in my opinion, this plan, when developed, and I think in my opinion, it'll probably be the end of July, mid-August before a plan gets finalized. And hopefully it'll be a very intricate plan, and it, in my opinion, will be the infrastructure to rebuild this party in a very inclusive way, to include not only our traditional Democrats, but our people of diversity, and hopefully fingers crossed, will be a way to reach out to people who are not engaged in the political process. Either they're registered to vote and don't vote, or they're not registered to vote at all, and we want them to see a reason to register Democrat and vote Democrat. And once we get them on board, we want them to come into the party. Sorry, Mary.
I just noticed that Hollis put 10 seconds in the chat, and I don't think anybody that's talking seeing the chat. So,
that was for the first talk. That was for the first lady who.
Oh, okay. I just saw it. So, will you speak up and say, Hollis? And I'm going to call on Kim next. Rosemary.
Sounds good.
And followed by that, Chris had her hand up. We'll check back with you, Chris.
Until next meeting.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I appreciate the recognition, Mary. I just wanted to address, and it may have already been addressed, but Betty had a question about inside meetings and whether or not we can address or we can adopt a hybrid model. Was that already addressed?
I'm sorry, Kim. Could you, somebody's unmuted. Could you mute? Because we can't hear Kim.
Sorry. There was a question about inside meetings from Betty Rivard, and I know that she's already spoken, so I wanted to clarify whether or not that's already been addressed.
No, please go ahead, Kim.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. There are no inside meetings. I'm not exactly sure what that means in terms of definitions and what your perception of an inside meeting might be. Betty, you can unmute yourself and maybe clarify, but there are no inside meetings. I do remember or recall, I think it was Selena or maybe even Mary addressing what the next set of meetings on the 21st, the 22nd, and 23rd are going to be, as well as the meeting on July 6th. I just want to repeat for everybody so that we're all hearing the same information and we all
time.
Whoa. Okay, cool.
Just to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to answer, I didn't mean inside politically. What I meant was inside a building. There's still a lot of us that don't go to inside buildings.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because that's exactly what I was concerned about. I just wanted to make sure people weren't like, I'm not holding any inside meetings. I don't know what that means. And I just wanted to be clear for the record that we are not holding any type of inside meetings.
That everything is outside.
Exactly. That everything is absolutely advertised and on the party's website. And we definitely give the requisite 14-day notice and in some cases 30-day notice for all meetings. So there's no private or secret meetings, I promise you, at least not that I'm aware of, that are being held. So thank you, Betty, for clarifying. Thank you. Yeah.
And next, Hollis.
Selena, I just want to go back to Selena in that when we talk about the timeline for implementing the affirmative action plan and a few more things that we have on our agenda for a little later. Could you give some updates just on some specific dates that are just important overall that we need to just be cognizant of?
Well, that's a really good question. There's not a meeting set for the fall for the West Virginia State Executive Committee in the fall. I think that's an important date when we know it. To be cognizant of it. People should know, and we want, because one of the really important things that we want people to do is to run for party positions, people of all diversities. And so in May, the primary in May of 2022, which is less than a year away, there will be all of the party positions, state executive committee, county executive committee, the congressional committees, those sort of things. All those will be on the ballot in the primary, and it doesn't go to the general. Like the final decision will be made in the primary. So we want to make sure that we are doing this outreach to encourage people on the county level, on the state level, on the regional level, of all diversities and all income levels. You know,
one question to that. When you say like county executive and all that, who's voting for those? Is that like general public, or is that just people like us voting for those positions?
No, those are people who vote for those are people who are registered Democrats. And if you are non-affiliated, if you're an independent voter, you can choose which ballot you want. So you can choose the Republican ballot, the Democrat ballot, Mountain Party, or Libertarian. I think those are the 4 ballots. And so those are the people that can vote. But primarily it's the diehard Democrats who show up in the primary who will be voting for those positions.
Thank you.
That's a very important date, is that, you know, May 2022, I'm not sure, I think it's the second Tuesday. And that's time that, you know, everybody has an opportunity to run and get that position.
So I'm going to turn it back over to Rosemary. We're just at the bottom of the hour, so that we're going to end on time. And I think that that's a question that should be brought up tomorrow at our updates for people so that people can start thinking about those dates and learning about them. Thank you, Hollis, for the question. Okay, Rosemary.
Great point. Thank you, Mary. So we will need to have several meetings before July to begin building the plan after the new co-chairs of the three caucuses are installed. So we will set some meetings in July, and I will get them on the books and make sure they're sent out in alignment with our requirements for meeting notice. And if we don't need them, of course, we can cancel them, but it's really, really important that we just get them on the books so that we can say that we have them set. I want to, before we close, I think I probably should have done this earlier, but I do not believe there is a co-chair of this committee. I believe I'm just the chair, and I think it would be helpful to have another voice, leading discussions. So Selena, I'm not sure the parliamentary procedure here, but we're allowed to identify a co-chair of this committee.
I think that Hollis and Mary, because they're chairs of the Affirmative Action Committee, can appoint, and I think that's their prerogative.
Okay, thank you. And that can happen at an Affirmative Action Committee meeting, correct?
I think it can happen between meetings.
Okay, wonderful.
So in other words, I think that they can, and I know that there's been some discussion about this today, but Mary and Hollis can certainly, appoint at, based on their discussions.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I just wanted to throw that into the universe. If somebody's listening on the call, there's a member of this subcommittee and is interested in being a team member here for co-chair, please let me know, or please reach out to Hollis or Mary, and maybe you can get that appointment. So we will be getting some dates on the books for future meetings so that we can get this plan out. I'm very excited, and I think that we learned a lot here tonight, particularly around data collection and outreach. And I'm so grateful and honored to be a part of this. I feel like we're making West Virginia history, and I know we are doing this together. So I'm grateful to you for being here and being part of this great discussion. Selena, do I need a motion to adjourn?
No.
All right. Well, that calls it. Thank you so much, folks. And please look for emails from myself to set up some meetings and get some dates on the books.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks. We'll talk soon.
Great job, Rosemary.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Hey, Selena, I don't think the official secretary was on this. Hey, Selena. Selena, I don't think the secretary was on this meeting. Do you know? Anybody know? Hey, Selena, do you know if the secretary was